I'm Allison, 25, and I spent 5 years working multiple jobs to save $15,000 for my dream car, a 1965 Ford Mustang. When I finally found the perfect one through our family friend Mr. Peterson, my parents secretly bought it behind my back and sold it to fund my sister Caitlin's European trip after college. The betrayal cut deep, but they never expected what came next. I made my entitled sister repay every single cent. If you've ever had something precious taken from you, hit that like button and subscribe. I'd love to know where you're watching from in the comments, and stick around to see how my parents realized they'd made the biggest mistake of their lives. Growing up in suburban Ohio, I was always the responsible one. While other teenagers were going to parties and hanging out at the mall, I was working part-time jobs and saving money. My passion for classic cars started with my grandfather, who restored vintage automobiles in his garage. Some of my fondest childhood memories involve sitting on a small stool next to him, handing him tools while he explained the inner workings of engines and carburetors. When he passed away when I was 15, I promised myself I'd own a classic Mustang by age 25 to honor his memory. My parents, James and Karen, never really understood my obsession with cars. "It's just a phase," they'd say whenever I talked about saving for a Mustang. "You'll grow out of it and want something more practical." But they never dismissed my younger sister Caitlin's dreams that way. 3 years younger than me, Caitlin was the family favorite from day one. While I was practical, studious, and somewhat introverted, Caitlin was outgoing, artistic, and the life of every family gathering. Our family wasn't wealthy by any means. Dad worked as a sales manager at an office supply company, and Mom was a part-time elementary school secretary. Money was always carefully budgeted in our household, which made the disparity in how they treated us even more apparent. When I needed $300 for SAT prep classes, Mom suggested I use my own savings because college was my choice. But when Caitlin wanted $800 for a summer fashion design program, they didn't hesitate to pay. When I got accepted to Ohio State with a partial scholarship, I still had to cover half my tuition through student loans. 2 years later, when Caitlin got accepted to a more expensive private design school in Chicago, they dipped into their retirement fund to ensure she graduated debt-free. I never confronted them about this favoritism. Maybe I didn't want to admit it to myself, or perhaps I was afraid of the conflict it would cause. Instead, I doubled down on my independence. During college, I worked as a waitress on weekends, tutored freshmen on weeknights, and spent summers interning at a local engineering firm. Every paycheck was carefully divided. 70% to living expenses and tuition, 25% to my Mustang fund, and 5% for small indulgences like coffee or the occasional movie night with friends. By my senior year of college, I had managed to save almost $10,000 toward my dream car. My parents knew about my savings but never took it seriously. "Wouldn't you rather use that money for a down payment on a house?" Mom would suggest. Meanwhile, they were helping Caitlin furnish her first apartment in Chicago after graduation, sending her monthly checks to help with expenses while she looked for her first design job. After college, I landed an entry-level position at an automotive parts manufacturer. The starting salary wasn't impressive, but it was enough to cover a small apartment and still add to my Mustang fund. I took on freelance technical writing gigs on the weekends to accelerate my savings. By my 25th birthday, after years of sacrifice and hard work, my dedicated Mustang account had finally reached $15,000. During a family dinner celebrating my birthday, I proudly announced that I had reached my goal. Dad nodded and quickly changed the subject to Caitlin's upcoming graduation. Mom asked if I was really sure about spending so much money on just a car. Meanwhile, they enthusiastically discussed plans to attend Caitlin's graduation ceremony in Chicago, brainstorming what gift would be appropriate for their youngest daughter's achievement. That evening, as I drove home to my apartment, I couldn't help but feel a familiar sting of disappointment. After all these years, my achievements still took a backseat to Caitlin's. But I consoled myself with the thought that soon, I would have the car of my dreams, something I had earned entirely on my own, without their help or approval. Little did I know that this pattern of favoritism was about to reach a breaking point that would forever change our family dynamic. The day after I reached my savings goal, I began my search in earnest. I'd been casually browsing online forums and classified ads for years, educating myself about the market, fair prices, common issues with vintage Mustangs, and what to look for when inspecting them. Now, with $15,000 ready to spend, I could finally move from dreaming to doing. I created a spreadsheet to track potential cars, ranking them by condition, mileage, originality, and distance from my home. I joined 3 different classic car Facebook groups and set up alerts on 5 different automotive websites. Every night after work, I'd spend hours researching, comparing, and contacting sellers. The first few Mustangs I looked at in person were disappointments. One had significant rust issues hidden beneath a hasty paint job. Another had a rebuilt engine with non-original parts. A third was beautifully restored but priced well beyond my budget at $22,000. 2 weeks into my search, I received a call from Mr. Peterson, my dad's friend from his bowling league. I had mentioned my search to my parents, and apparently, word had gotten around. "Allison, I hear you're looking for a classic Mustang," Mr. Peterson said. "I've got a '65 coupe I've been thinking about selling. Candy apple red with a black interior. It's not perfect, but it's honest." My heart raced. "Would you mind if I came to look at it?" "Not at all. How about this Saturday?" That Saturday morning, I could barely contain my excitement as I drove to Mr. Peterson's house in the next town over. When I pulled into his driveway, I saw it immediately, parked under the carport, gleaming in the morning sunlight. A 1965 Ford Mustang coupe in candy apple red, exactly the color my grandfather's had been. Mr. Peterson walked me around the car, pointing out its features and the few minor flaws. The 289 V8 engine had been rebuilt 15,000 miles ago. The interior was original but well-maintained, with no tears or excessive wear. The paint was a professional respray done 5 years earlier. There was a small dent on the rear quarter panel and some pitting on the chrome bumpers, but otherwise, it was in exceptional condition for a car of its age. "Want to take her for a spin?" he asked, holding out the keys. My hands trembled slightly as I slid behind the wheel. The vinyl seat felt cool against my back, and the thin steering wheel was smooth under my fingers. The engine roared to life with a turn of the key, settling into a deep, throaty idle that sent vibrations through the floorboards. As I carefully backed out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse of myself in the rearview mirror. I was grinning ear to ear. The drive was everything I'd imagined. The Mustang handled differently from modern cars, heavier, more deliberate, demanding respect, but it felt right. The rumble of the engine, the mechanical precision of the gear shifts, the way it smoothly accelerated when I pressed the gas, it was perfect. We drove through the countryside for about 20 minutes, the spring air rushing through the slightly lowered windows, before returning to Mr. Peterson's house. "She's beautiful," I said as I reluctantly handed back the keys. "How much are you asking?" Mr. Peterson named a price of $16,500, which was fair for the car's condition but still above my budget. I told him about my $15,000 savings and the story of my grandfather, not expecting much. He smiled warmly. "Your grandfather was a car man, huh? I respect that." After a moment's thought, he added, "Tell you what. I've known your family for years, and I'd rather see this car go to someone who'll love it properly. 15,000, cash, and she's yours." I could hardly believe my ears. We shook hands, and I promised to return the following weekend with the cash. I drove home feeling like I was floating, already planning where I'd take my Mustang on its first proper drive. Maybe up to Lake Erie, or down the winding roads of Hocking Hills. That evening, I excitedly told my parents about Mr. Peterson's Mustang over the phone. Their response was lukewarm at best. "That's a lot of money for an old car," Mom said with concern in her voice. "Insurance will be expensive too," Dad added. "And where will you park it?" "Your apartment lot isn't secure," Mom chimed in. I explained that I'd researched insurance costs months ago, and that I'd already spoken with my landlord about renting a covered spot in the back of the complex. But they seemed distracted, quickly changing the subject to Caitlin's upcoming graduation ceremony and how excited they were to see her walk across the stage. As we hung up, I felt a familiar twinge of disappointment, but I pushed it aside. This was my moment, my achievement, and I didn't need their enthusiasm to validate it. On Saturday, I would have my dream car, the culmination of years of hard work and sacrifice. Looking back, I should have paid more attention to the strange tone in my father's voice when he asked for Mr. Peterson's phone number, just to catch up with an old friend. I should have noticed my mother's unusual interest in when exactly I planned to pick up the car. But I was too caught up in my excitement to sense that something was wrong. That week crawled by at an agonizing pace. I withdrew the cash from my savings account on Thursday, storing it in my apartment safe. I researched temporary insurance options so I could drive the car home legally. I even bought a small toolkit and a book on Mustang maintenance, planning to learn everything I could about keeping my new baby in pristine condition. By Saturday morning, I was too excited to eat breakfast. I triple-checked that I had the cash, my driver's license, and insurance information before heading to Mr. Peterson's house. As I drove, I imagined how different the return journey would be, behind the wheel of my very own classic Mustang. But when I arrived, I immediately sensed that something was wrong. Mr. Peterson's wife answered the door instead of him, her expression uncomfortable as she invited me in. In the living room, Mr. Peterson sat in his armchair, looking anywhere but at me. "I'm sorry, Allison," he said finally. "I can't sell you the Mustang." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What do you mean?" "We had a deal," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Peterson looked genuinely distressed. "Your parents called me on Wednesday. They bought the car themselves. They said they wanted to surprise you, but needed me to hold off on our arrangement." My mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. Why would my parents buy the car? They'd never shown any interest in my dream. In fact, they'd always been dismissive of it. Did they say why? I asked, gripping the envelope of cash so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Not specifically," Mr. Peterson replied, clearly uncomfortable. "Your father just said it was a family matter and asked me to let them handle it. I assumed it was going to be some kind of surprise gift for you." "I'm sorry, Allison. If I'd known there was going to be a problem, I never would have agreed." I thanked him robotically and walked back to my car in a daze. As I sat behind the wheel, tears blurred my vision. Something wasn't right. My parents wouldn't suddenly decide to support my dream after years of dismissing it. They were planning something, and a sick feeling in my stomach told me it wasn't anything good. I drove directly to my parents' house, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed with a jolt that the Mustang wasn't there. My father's sedan and mother's SUV were parked in their usual spots, but there was no sign of the classic car that should have been mine. I burst through the front door without knocking. Mom was at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, and Dad was reading a newspaper in his recliner. They both looked up, startled by my entrance. "Where is it?" I demanded, my voice trembling with anger and hurt. They exchanged a look, that knowing, complicit look parents give each other when they've made a decision together. "Honey, calm down," Mom started. "Don't tell me to calm down," I snapped. "Mr. Peterson told me you bought the Mustang. Where is it?" Dad sighed, folding his newspaper deliberately before speaking. "We sold it." Two simple words that shattered my world. "You, what?" "We sold it to the Henderson's son," Dad explained matter-of-factly. "He's been looking for a classic car to restore, and he gave us a good price for it. $17,000 cash." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You sold my car? The car I've been saving for since I was 16? "It wasn't your car yet, sweetie," Mom interjected in that patronizing tone she always used when she thought I was being unreasonable. "We just thought that money could be put to better use." "Better use?" I repeated, my voice rising. "What better use?" That's when the front door opened, and Caitlin walked in, carrying shopping bags. She stopped short when she saw me standing there, taking in my tear-streaked face and clenched fists. "What's going on?" she asked, looking between us. "Your sister is upset about the Mustang," Dad explained. Caitlin's face fell slightly. "Oh, you told her already? I thought we were going to wait until dinner." "Tell me what?" I demanded. Mom stood up, walking over to put her arm around Caitlin's shoulders. "Your sister has an amazing opportunity. One of her professors recommended her for an exclusive post-graduation tour of European fashion houses. Paris, Milan, London. It's an incredible chance for her to make connections in the industry. But it's expensive," Dad continued. "The program fees, international flights, accommodation, it all adds up. When we heard about Mr. Peterson's Mustang, we realized we could use that money to help fund Caitlin's trip." I stood there, stunned into silence as the full picture emerged. They had stolen my dream to fund my sister's European vacation. "You used my savings to pay for her trip?" I finally managed to choke out. "Not your savings," Mom corrected quickly. "We bought the car from Mr. Peterson ourselves. Your money is still in your account." "That's not the point," I shouted. "That car was going to be mine. I've been saving for years, working multiple jobs, sacrificing everything to afford it." Caitlin stepped forward, her expression a mixture of guilt and defensiveness. "I'm sorry you're upset, Allie, but this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for me. You can just save up again. It's just a car. Just a car. Just a car. The car I'd dreamed about for nearly a decade. The car that connected me to my grandfather's memory. The car I'd earned through years of hard work and sacrifice. And this is just a vacation," I shot back. "You could save up for it yourself instead of letting Mom and Dad steal my dream for you." "That's enough," Dad said sternly. "We're your parents, and we made a decision that's best for the family. Caitlin needs this opportunity for her career. Your car can wait." "Best for the family?" I laughed bitterly. "Or best for Caitlin, like always? When have you ever put my needs first?" Mom looked hurt. "That's not fair, Allison. We've always supported both our daughters." "Supported both equally? Really?" The dam had broken, and years of resentment came flooding out. Who paid for Caitlin's private design school while I took out loans for state college? Who bought Caitlin a new car for her 16th birthday while I had to save for 2 years to buy a used Honda? Who sends Caitlin money every month for expenses while telling me I need to learn financial independence? My family stared at me in shocked silence. I had never confronted them about their favoritism before, had never put it into words so explicitly. Caitlin recovered first. "That's different. My career needs." "Stop," I cut her off. "Just stop. My entire life, I've watched you get handed everything while I worked for scraps. And now, the one thing I've worked toward for years, the one thing that was finally going to be mine, you've taken that too." I turned to my parents, tears streaming down my face. "I hope her little European adventure is worth it, because this is the last thing you're ever taking from me." I stormed out, ignoring their calls to come back and talk. I drove to my friend Ashley's apartment, shaking with anger and heartbreak. When I explained what happened, she immediately offered me her couch for as long as I needed. For 3 weeks, I maintained minimal contact with my family. Mom called daily at first, then every few days, leaving voicemails that ranged from apologetic to defensive. Dad texted occasionally, suggesting we talk like adults. Caitlin sent a single text saying she was sorry I was upset but that she was still going to Europe because this opportunity is crucial for my career. None of them seemed to grasp the magnitude of what they'd done. It wasn't just about the car, it was about respect. They had shown me, in the clearest possible way, that my feelings, my dreams, and my hard work meant nothing compared to Caitlin's wants. As the initial shock and hurt began to subside, it was replaced by a cold, clear resolve. They had taken something precious from me. And one way or another, I would make them understand exactly what that felt like. After 3 weeks of minimal contact with my family, I was still staying at Ashley's apartment. The hurt had crystallized into determination. I needed to make my family understand that their actions had consequences, especially Caitlin, who seemed to float through life oblivious to her privilege. One evening, as Ashley and I shared a pizza, I expressed my frustration about having no legal recourse. "I talked to Martin," I said, referring to our mutual friend who was in his second year of law school. "He says since the car was never officially mine, and the transaction was between Mr. Peterson and my parents, I have no legal claim." Ashley took a thoughtful bite of pizza. "So what are you going to do? Just let it go?" "Never," I replied firmly. "But I need to be smart about this." Later that night, after Ashley had gone to bed, I sat at her kitchen table with my laptop open. If I couldn't get the car back, what would be equivalent justice? My parents had spent $15,000 of their money, not mine technically, but they had stolen my opportunity, my dream. The answer came to me suddenly: Caitlin should repay every cent. My sister had been the beneficiary of my parents' betrayal. She was enjoying a European adventure bought with the loss of my dream car. It was only fair that she should feel the financial impact of that decision. I spent the next several hours researching loan agreements online. I found templates, studied the language, and began customizing one to fit my specific situation. If my parents wanted to treat this as a financial transaction rather than a profound betrayal, then I would respond in kind. I calculated a fair interest rate based on standard personal loans, 8% annually, compounded monthly. I established a repayment schedule of $500 per month, which would mean a commitment of about 2.5 years for Caitlin. I included late payment penalties and a clause requiring her to put up collateral, specifically, the expensive camera equipment our parents had bought her for her 21st birthday. The next morning, I called my friend Jason, who worked as a financial advisor at a local bank. After explaining my situation, I asked him to review the agreement. "This is surprisingly thorough," he said, scrolling through the document on my phone. "You've covered all the basics. But are you sure you want to take this approach? It's pretty hardline. What would you suggest?" I asked. Jason considered for a moment. "Well, you could include a clause allowing her to reduce the debt through non-monetary means. Like helping you find another classic car, or putting in sweat equity on restoration projects." I shook my head. "No. I don't want to give her an easy out. She needs to feel the weight of this financially, just like I've felt the loss of something I worked years for." After a few more minor adjustments, Jason helped me finalize the document and recommended getting it notarized to add official weight, though he warned it might still be difficult to enforce legally. 2 days later, I went to a notary public and had 3 copies of the agreement officially stamped. That evening, I gathered with Ashley and our friends Martin and Jason to strategize my approach. "You need to be completely emotionless," Martin advised. "The minute you show anger or hurt, they'll dismiss this as you being emotional or vindictive." "Right," Ashley agreed. "Businesslike and matter of fact. Like this is the most reasonable thing in the world. And be prepared for them to refuse initially," Jason added. "Have a clear statement of what happens if Caitlin doesn't sign." "Complete estrangement," I said without hesitation. "If they can't respect me enough to make this right, then I don't need them in my life." My friends exchanged concerned glances. "That's a big step, Allie," Ashley said gently. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything," I replied. "My entire life, I've accepted being second best, being the responsible one who doesn't get rewarded, being the daughter whose dreams don't matter. I'm done with that dynamic. Either they acknowledge what they did and make it right, or they can continue being a family of 3. We practiced scenarios, with Jason role-playing as my father, offering various objections and emotional appeals that I might face. By the end of the evening, I felt prepared for the confrontation. As I lay on Ashley's couch that night, staring at the ceiling, I felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time in my life, I was standing up for myself, demanding the respect I deserved. Whatever happened tomorrow, I would no longer be the doormat daughter who silently accepted unfair treatment. I drifted off to sleep with one thought: by this time tomorrow, the power dynamic in my family would be forever changed. I chose my timing carefully. Through Ashley, who was still in contact with my mom, I learned that Caitlin had returned from Europe 2 days earlier. My mother had planned a special family dinner to celebrate her homecoming and hear all about her adventures. It was the perfect opportunity. I dressed deliberately that evening, a crisp button-down shirt, dark jeans, and low heels. Professional, but not overly formal. I styled my hair neatly and applied minimal makeup. I wanted to look composed and serious, not like someone caught in an emotional tailspin. The loan agreement was tucked into a manila envelope in my purse. I had rehearsed what I would say so many times that the words flowed naturally in my mind, devoid of the emotional charge they once carried. As I pulled into my parents' driveway, I took a deep breath. Through the dining room window, I could see my family already seated at the table. My father was pouring wine, my mother was bringing a dish to the table, and Caitlin was animatedly talking, likely regaling them with European tales. A normal, happy family dinner, except for the conspicuous absence of their other daughter. I rang the doorbell instead of using my key. A small but deliberate choice to establish that I was no longer comfortable walking into their house unannounced. Mom opened the door, her surprise quickly giving way to delight. "Allison. You came." She moved to hug me, but I stepped past her into the foyer, maintaining my composure. "I heard Caitlin was back," I said evenly. "I thought we should talk." In the dining room, Dad stood up from his chair. "Allie, it's good to see you. We've been worried. You haven't been answering our calls." "I needed time to think," I replied, remaining standing as they all watched me, uncertain of the new dynamic. Caitlin broke the awkward silence. "I brought you something from Paris," she said, reaching for a small gift bag beside her plate. "It's a vintage car keychain I found at this amazing little flea market. I thought maybe, for when you get your car eventually." The casual eventually sent a surge of anger through me, but I maintained my neutral expression. "Thanks, but that's not why I'm here." Mom gestured to the empty chair. "Well, sit down. I've made your favorite, pot roast with those roasted potatoes you like." "I'm not staying for dinner," I said. "I just came to discuss something important with all of you." I placed my purse on the table and withdrew the manila envelope. The room went silent as I removed the document and slid it across the table toward Caitlin. "What's this?" she asked, not making a move to open it. "It's a loan agreement," I explained, my voice steady. "For $15,000, plus interest at 8%. Payable in monthly installments of $500 over approximately 2.5 years. My family stared at me in confusion. Dad was the first to reach for the document, opening it and scanning the first page with growing disbelief. "This is ridiculous," he sputtered. "You expect your sister to pay you for a car we bought with our own money?" "I expect her to repay me for what was taken from me," I corrected him. "You and Mom made a unilateral decision to prioritize Caitlin's European trip over my dream. That's your right as parents. But actions have consequences, and this is the consequence." Mom looked horrified. "Allison, we're family, not a bank. We don't loan each other money with interest rates and repayment schedules." "That's exactly my point," I replied calmly. "Family should respect each other's dreams and hard work. Family shouldn't steal opportunities from one member to benefit another. Since you chose to ignore those principles, we're going to handle this as a business transaction instead." Caitlin finally spoke up, her voice indignant. "This is insane. I'm not signing this." I'd anticipated this reaction. "That's your choice. But if you refuse, I want to be very clear about what happens next." I looked each of them in the eye as I continued. "I will cut all ties with this family. No holidays, no birthdays, no phone calls. I will explain to every relative, friend, and acquaintance exactly why I no longer speak to you. And I will share our story on every social media platform, detailing exactly how you stole my dream car to fund Caitlin's European vacation. You wouldn't, Dad challenged, though uncertainty flickered in his eyes. Try me, I responded, my voice quiet but firm. I have nothing to lose at this point. You've already shown me where I stand in this family's hierarchy. This is emotional blackmail, Mom protested, tears forming in her eyes. No, I corrected her. This is a boundary. For the first time in my life, I'm standing up for myself and demanding the respect I deserve. I've spent my entire life watching you give Caitlin everything while I worked twice as hard for half as much. The car was the last straw. I turned to my sister, who was staring at the agreement with a mixture of shock and growing realization. Caitlin, you've always been the golden child, and I don't blame you for that. But it's time for you to understand what privilege looks like. It looks like having your dreams funded at the expense of someone else's. It looks like never having to work for what you want because someone else always provides it. That's not fair, she protested weakly. I work hard too. Do you? I challenged. Did you work multiple jobs through college? Did you save for 5 years to buy something special? Have you ever been told that your dreams need to take a back seat to mine? She fell silent, unable to meet my eyes. Dad tried a different approach. Look, if it's about the money, your mother and I can pay you the $15,000. We'll write a check right now. I shook my head. This isn't about the money. It's about accountability. Caitlin benefited from the sacrifice of my dream, so Caitlin needs to make it right. This isn't your debt to pay. But it was our decision, Mom insisted. We're the ones who bought and sold the car. Yes, and you'll have to live with the knowledge of what that decision has cost this family, I replied. But the material benefit went to Caitlin, so the material repayment comes from her. I looked at my sister again. You have a choice to make. Sign the agreement and begin rebuilding our relationship through actions, not empty apologies. Or don't sign, and accept that you'll no longer have a sister. The room fell silent. Dad reread the agreement, his jaw clenched. Mom wiped tears from her cheeks. Caitlin stared at the document, conflict evident on her face. This is ridiculous, she finally said, but her voice lacked conviction. I can't afford $500 a month. I'm just starting my career. Welcome to the real world, I replied without sympathy. Where actions have financial consequences and we don't always get what we want. I couldn't afford to lose my dream car either, but that didn't matter to anyone here. After another long silence, Dad pushed back his chair. I think we all need to calm down and discuss this rationally. Allison, stay for dinner, and we'll. No, I cut him off. I'm not staying, and there's nothing more to discuss. Either Caitlin signs the agreement tonight, or I walk out that door and you don't see me again. The ultimatum hung in the air. I remained standing, calm and resolute. This was the moment of truth. Would my family finally respect my boundaries, or would they continue to dismiss my feelings as they always had? Caitlin looked up at me, really seeing me perhaps for the first time. You're serious, aren't you? You'd really cut us all off? Dead serious, I confirmed. The car wasn't just a car to me, Caitlin. It represented years of work, sacrifice, and a connection to Grandpa. When you all dismissed it as just a car and took it away for your benefit, you showed me exactly how little you value me and my dreams. I won't be part of a family that treats me that way. My sister looked down at the agreement again, then slowly reached for a pen from the center of the table. Mom, Dad, I think I need to sign this. Caitlin, no. Mom protested. This is between us and your sister. We'll pay her back. It's not just about the money, Caitlin said quietly, echoing my earlier words. Allie's right. I did benefit from this. I got an amazing European trip at the cost of her dream. If I don't make this right, I'll lose my sister. She looked up at me. And despite everything, I don't want that. With shaking hands, she signed all 3 copies of the agreement. I signed them as well, then handed her one copy and kept two for myself. "The first payment is due on the 1st of next month," I said, returning the documents to my purse. "I'll text you my account details." As I turned to leave, Dad called out, "Is this really how you want things to be between us, Allison? Legal agreements and payment schedules instead of trust and love?" I paused at the doorway and looked back at my family, my father's anger, my mother's tears, and Caitlin's dawning comprehension. "You're the ones who decided money was more important than my feelings," I said quietly. "I'm just following your example." With those words, I walked out, feeling the weight of years of resentment beginning to lift from my shoulders. For the first time I had stood my ground and demanded respect. Whether our family would heal from this remained to be seen, but I knew one thing for certain: the old dynamic was shattered forever. The first payment arrived exactly on schedule, transferred directly to my account with no accompanying message. I hadn't expected Caitlin to follow through so promptly, and despite everything, I felt a small surge of respect for her keeping her word. Our interactions during those first few months were strictly transactional. We'd meet briefly at a coffee shop where she would show me proof of the transfer on her phone, I'd acknowledge it, and we'd part ways with minimal conversation. Mom tried repeatedly to mediate, suggesting family dinners or holiday gatherings, but I remained firm. This wasn't just about the money, it was about a fundamental shift in our family dynamic that needed time to stabilize. By the third month, the strain was beginning to show on Caitlin. She arrived at our usual coffee shop looking tired, her designer clothes replaced by more modest attire. "Everything okay?" I asked, more out of politeness than genuine concern. She sighed heavily. "Not really. This monthly payment is killing me. My starting salary at the design firm barely covers rent and basic expenses. After your payment, I have almost nothing left for savings or, well, actually living." A part of me felt vindicated. For the first time, Caitlin was experiencing the financial constraints I'd lived with for years. "That's what financial responsibility feels like," I replied, unable to keep a hint of satisfaction from my voice. "Welcome to how most people live." "I get it, okay," she snapped, unusual frustration breaking through her normally composed demeanor. "You think I'm spoiled and entitled." Message received, loud and clear. I stirred my coffee thoughtfully. "It's not about punishing you, Caitlin. It's about consequences. For years, I watched you get everything handed to you while I worked twice as hard for half as much. This is the first time you're experiencing the real world without Mom and Dad's safety net." "They've offered to help with the payments," she admitted. "Multiple times. I've refused." This surprised me. "Why?" "Because you're right," she said quietly. "This is my responsibility. I got the benefit, so I should bear the cost." She paused, then added, "Plus, I don't think it would mean anything to you if they paid. This is between you and me." That was the first moment I felt something shift between us, a small acknowledgement that perhaps she was beginning to understand. The fourth month brought a crisis. Caitlin texted me the day before our scheduled meeting, "Can't make payment on time. Need 2 more weeks. We'll pay extra interest per agreement." According to our contract, late payment meant an additional 2% penalty. I could have waived it, but I needed to see if she would honor the agreement when it was difficult, not just when it was convenient. 2 weeks later, she handed me a check for the full amount plus penalty. "I had to sell my Gucci handbag," she said, a mixture of resentment and resignation in her voice. "The one Mom and Dad gave me for graduation. I sold plasma twice a week during my junior year of college to make rent," I replied evenly. "We all make sacrifices." Her eyes widened. "You never told me that. You never asked about my life, Caitlin. You were too busy living yours." The 6th month marked a turning point. I arrived at the coffee shop to find Caitlin already there, not just with proof of payment but with a large portfolio case. "I paid already, transferred this morning," she said, pushing her phone across the table to show me the confirmation. Then she opened the portfolio. "I wanted to show you something else." I've been freelancing on the side to make the payments without falling behind on rent. Inside were design sketches for a clothing line, simple but elegant pieces with clean lines and practical features. It's a workwear collection for professional women, she explained, a hint of pride in her voice. No nonsense, functional but still stylish. I've got a small manufacturer interested in producing a limited run. I leafed through the sketches, genuinely impressed. These are really good, Caitlin. Different from your usual aesthetic. Yeah, well, when your budget for materials shrinks, you get creative, she said with a self-deprecating laugh. But honestly, I think these are some of the best designs I've ever done. Constraints breed innovation, right? It was the first time I'd seen my sister genuinely proud of something she'd accomplished entirely on her own, without parental funding or support. I felt an unexpected warmth toward her. Right, I agreed with a small smile. That same week, Dad called and asked to meet me for lunch, just the two of us. Curious, I agreed. He looked older than I remembered, stress lines more pronounced around his eyes. After ordering, he cleared his throat awkwardly. I've been doing a lot of thinking, Allie, he began, using my childhood nickname for the first time in years. About the car, about how we've treated you and Caitlin differently. He paused, struggling visibly with what came next. I was wrong. We were wrong. I remained silent, waiting. I always told myself we were just responding to each of you differently based on your personalities. You were so independent, so capable from such a young age. Caitlin needed more guidance, more support. He shook his head. But that's no excuse for dismissing your dreams or taking for granted all your hard work. No, it's not, I agreed quietly. Seeing how you've stood your ground these past months, watching Caitlin actually grow up and take responsibility. His voice cracked slightly. I'm ashamed of what we did, Allie. I'm so sorry. It was the apology I'd been waiting for, but now that it had arrived, I found myself uncertain how to respond. Part of me wanted to throw it back in his face, to make him suffer longer. But the larger part recognized the courage it took for him to admit his mistake. Thank you for saying that, I finally said. It means a lot to hear you acknowledge it. Your mother's having a harder time, he admitted. She still thinks the loan agreement is too harsh, that families shouldn't operate this way. And what do you think? I asked. He considered the question carefully. I think sometimes the harshest lessons are the most valuable ones. This has been hard on all of us, but I can't deny that I'm seeing changes in Caitlin I never thought possible. He reached across the table, not quite touching my hand. And I'm seeing a strength in you that I've always known was there but never properly respected. Over the next few months, a new family dynamic began to emerge. Mom eventually came around after Caitlin surprisingly took my side during a tense family dinner. Mom, stop trying to make Allison the bad guy, Caitlin had said firmly. She's right to hold me accountable. I'm learning more from this experience than I did in 4 years of college. Mom had stared at her youngest daughter in shock, and used to being challenged by her usual ally. After 8 months of payments, Caitlin invited me to her apartment for coffee instead of meeting at our usual spot. The place was noticeably different, gone were many of the expensive decorative items and fashion industry memorabilia. The space was simpler, more practical, but somehow more personal. I've been thinking, she said as she poured coffee into mismatched mugs. Would you be open to restructuring our agreement? My guard immediately went up. In what way? Not to reduce the amount, she clarified quickly. But I've been offered a chance to show my workwear collection at a small fashion showcase. If it goes well, I could get orders that would significantly increase my income. But I need capital to produce the sample pieces. And? I prompted. And I'm wondering if I could pause the payments for 3 months to invest in this opportunity, then resume with larger payments afterward. Or maybe you'd consider it an investment opportunity yourself? I could offer you a percentage of any profits. I studied my sister's face, seeing not entitlement or expectation, but a businesswoman making a proposal. It was a side of Caitlin I'd never seen before. "Send me your business plan," I said finally. "Let me think about it." Her face lit up. "Really? You'll consider it?" "That's what investors do," I replied with a small smile. "They evaluate opportunities based on merit, not family obligation." 2 weeks later, after reviewing her surprisingly thorough business plan, I agreed to a modified payment structure that allowed her to pursue her collection. When the showcase came around, I found myself in the audience, watching proudly as Caitlin presented designs that genuinely impressed the industry representatives in attendance. After the show, she rushed up to me, eyes bright with accomplishment. "3 boutiques want to carry the collection. And a small department store chain is interested in exclusive rights to the office to evening pieces." "That's amazing, Caitlin," I said, genuinely happy for her. "You did that all on your own?" Her smile faltered slightly. "I couldn't have done it without you." "I didn't design those clothes," I pointed out. "No, but you gave me the kick in the ass I needed to grow up," she replied frankly. "Before all this, I never would have had the confidence to launch my own collection. I was too dependent on Mom and Dad's approval, too afraid of failing." It was a profound realization that my act of standing up for myself had inadvertently given my sister the push she needed to stand on her own feet as well. As we approached the 1-year mark of our agreement, my family suggested we all attend therapy together. Surprisingly, it was Dad who made the suggestion. "We've all made progress individually," he said during a family dinner that I now attended regularly. "But I think we need help addressing the underlying patterns that got us here in the first place." The family therapy sessions were challenging but illuminating. Our therapist, Dr. Mitchell, helped us identify and discuss the family dynamics we'd all participated in: my parents' different expectations for their daughters, my resignation to the role of responsible but overlooked child, Caitlin's comfortable position as the favored daughter. "Families often fall into roles that become self-reinforcing," Dr. Mitchell explained in one particularly insightful session. "Allison, the more responsible and self-sufficient you became, the less your parents felt you needed support, which led you to become even more independent. Meanwhile, Caitlin, the more your parents stepped in to help you, the less you developed those self-sufficiency muscles, which reinforced their perception that you needed more assistance." It was a revelation to hear our family pattern described so accurately. More importantly, it helped remove the element of blame. My parents hadn't consciously set out to favor Caitlin, they had fallen into a pattern that none of us had recognized or challenged until the car incident forced a reckoning. As the therapy sessions continued and Caitlin faithfully maintained her payment schedule, our relationship gradually transformed from transactional to genuinely supportive. When her collection began to generate profit, she insisted on maintaining the original payment amount even though she could now afford more. "The agreement isn't just about the money anymore," she told me. "It's about following through on my commitment." By the time we reached the 1-year mark, our family had undergone a profound transformation. My parents made conscious efforts to recognize and support my goals. Caitlin had blossomed into a more independent, thoughtful adult. And I had learned that standing up for myself didn't have to mean standing alone. 1 year and 2 months after signing our agreement, Caitlin invited me to dinner at her apartment. When I arrived, I was surprised to find my parents there as well, along with a cake in the center of the table. "What's the occasion?" I asked, confused by the unexpected gathering. Caitlin handed me an envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for $7,248, the remaining balance of the loan including interest. "My collection got picked up by that department store chain," she explained, unable to contain her excitement. "Full order, advance payment." I wanted to clear the debt completely. I stared at the check, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. The money had long since ceased to be the point of our arrangement. The regular payment meetings had become a touchstone in our evolving relationship, a monthly reminder of the new boundaries and respect we were establishing. "Are you sure?" I asked. "This wasn't necessary." "Yes, it was," Caitlin insisted. "Starting fresh means clearing all debts. Besides, I have something else to show you." She handed me another envelope. Inside were printouts of a car listing, a 1967 Ford Mustang fastback in Highland Green, in need of significant restoration work. "It's not the same as Mr. Peterson's 65, she said hesitantly, but the owner is willing to sell it for exactly what you have now. The original $15,000 plus the interest I've paid so far. It needs work, but..." "It's perfect," I breathed, examining the photos more closely. Unlike the meticulously maintained car I'd lost, this one had faded paint, a worn interior, and an engine that would need rebuilding. But somehow, that made it even more appealing, a project that would require time, effort, and dedication. A car with a story yet to be written. Dad cleared his throat. "I already checked it out mechanically. The bones are good, solid frame, no major rust issues. It's a diamond in the rough." "We thought," Mom added tentatively, "that maybe it could be a family project. If you wanted." I looked up at my family, my father's hopeful expression, my mother's nervous smile, Caitlin's genuine excitement. A year ago, I would have rejected their offer outright, seeing it as another attempt to control my dream. But now, I recognized it for what it was, a genuine attempt at reconciliation, an acknowledgement of past wrongs, and an effort to create something new together. "I'd like that," I said softly. 2 weeks later, the Mustang was delivered to my parents' garage. What began as an uncertain family project quickly became the highlight of our weekends. Dad, who had basic mechanical knowledge but had never tackled a restoration, dove into online forums and restoration guides. Mom, surprisingly, revealed a talent for hunting down authentic parts at reasonable prices. Caitlin applied her design skills to the interior plans, creating mood boards and sourcing period-correct fabrics. As for me, I became the project manager, using the organizational skills I'd developed throughout my life to keep our restoration on track. I established a realistic timeline, created a detailed budget, and made sure we weren't cutting corners that would compromise the car's authenticity or safety. The first time we got the engine to turn over after months of work, we all cheered and hugged each other in the oil-stained garage, covered in grease but filled with collective pride. It was perhaps the first thing we had ever truly accomplished as a family, each contributing our unique strengths toward a common goal. During one memorable Saturday as we worked on installing the rebuilt transmission, Caitlin turned to me with an expression of newfound respect. "You know, I never really understood why a car was so important to you," she admitted, handing me a wrench. "But now I get it. It's not just about having a cool ride. It's about the process, the achievement, the connection to something larger than yourself." "Exactly," I nodded, surprised and touched by her insight. "Grandpa used to say that restoring a car teaches you as much about yourself as it does about mechanics." He was right, Dad chimed in, sliding out from under the chassis. "I've learned more about patience in the last 3 months than in 60 years of living. And I've learned about the satisfaction of earning something versus having it handed to you," Caitlin added. "That's a lesson I should have learned years ago." 9 months after beginning the restoration, we took the Mustang for its first real drive, a family road trip to Lake Erie, just as I had once dreamed of doing with my original Mustang. As I drove with the windows down, the rumble of the V8 engine providing the perfect soundtrack, I glanced at my family in the rearview mirror. Mom and Dad were holding hands in the back seat, looking more relaxed than I'd seen them in years. Caitlin sat beside me in the passenger seat, her hair blowing in the wind, a genuine smile on her face. In that moment, I realized that while I had lost one dream car, I had gained something far more valuable, a family that finally saw me, respected me, and valued my dreams as much as their own. The car that brought us together wasn't just a vehicle, it was a vessel for transformation, carrying us all toward a healthier, more balanced relationship. When we returned home, we gathered in my parents' living room, tired but content after our journey. Dad raised a glass and a toast. "To Allison," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "who taught us all that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Without your courage, none of us would have grown the way we have this past year." "And to second chances," Mom added softly, "both for cars and for families." As we clinked glasses, I reflected on everything that had happened since that devastating day when I learned my dream car had been sold. What had begun as a moment of profound betrayal had transformed into an opportunity for growth and healing. My parents had learned to treat both their daughters with equal respect. Caitlin had developed independence and empathy. And I had discovered that standing firm in my worth didn't have to mean standing alone. Sometimes, justice isn't about punishment or revenge, it's about rebalancing relationships that have fallen out of alignment. It's about establishing boundaries that allow love to flow in healthy ways. And sometimes, the journey toward justice leads to unexpected destinations far more valuable than where you originally intended to go. As we sat together that evening, I realized that while I had set out to make my family understand the weight of what they had taken from me, what we had all gained in the process was immeasurably more precious than any car could ever be. So, what about you? Have you ever had to stand up to your family to be treated fairly? Did it change your relationships for better or worse? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and share this video with someone who might need encouragement to stand up for themselves. Remember, sometimes the most difficult conversations lead to the most meaningful growth. Thank you for watching, and I hope you find the courage to create healthy boundaries in your own relationships.